Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're in the middle of the week here. We're going to continue moving on with Short Rhapsody Week. What this week's theme is all about is songs less than 7 minutes that go through several sections rather than a song that would traditionally just use a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus idea. And these songs should all have multiple sections that run us through a variety of different writing styles or moments. Alright, so let's get into this one. We got Scardust coming up. Overture for the Estranged. Let's get into this. Ooh. Real nice harmonies right off the bat. Yes. Ooh. I love the way they split and then line back up. Oh. That double half step rise. Yeah, so we're at 11 now. So that's cool. Alternating 5 and 6. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, they're changing time signatures all over the place. We were in straight 5 there, and then we moved to a 6 for 1 bar, but that bar didn't come back on the repetition. Oh, beautiful chord work under this amazing melody. Yes. Amazing contrast too. We're at half the volume we just were. That's like legit half the volume. We're into 4 now with this crazy synth background. What a weird 4/4. Yeah. Every other bar 4, they leave 1 empty, and it feels weird. Amazing counterpoint going on. Great harmony. Bringing back in the choir from the intro. Really nice bass and guitar harmony going on here. Yeah, those eighth note triplets coming into this, that's a good transition. Those offbeat hits to transition into this section. Oh. Well played. I don't know what we were in before this, but we're back to Chord. It's interesting how often they go from these majestic lines to these real heavy. And now back to the majesty. The violin's doing some nice counterpoints into the choir's melody line. I really like that final section. They were really pushing hard into unstable chords without moving into a chord that's actually going to provide some resolution to it, which is kind of gutsy, given how strong their progressions have been up to this point. Not strong as in well written, but strong as in strong identification of direction and resolution. They really went into those ideas of creating good chordal movement throughout almost the entire song. They used a lot of interesting classical chords that we don't typically see too often in rock and metal, and we had some really beautiful textured chord progressions in some of those sections. Then we had more traditional metal progressions in other sections, but pretty much everything had really nice direction and resolution to it. And it's really interesting that when they were repeating Stranger, that is when they couldn't resolve the instability from their chords, and they were bouncing back and forth between the start of a progression and then more of a leading tone that kind of led back into the start, but really wanted to go somewhere else. It was more like a half resolution they were returning to, because it was a 2-chord loop rather than a 4-chord progression or an 8-chord progression. You know, there wasn't direction to it. It was cyclical compared to a lot of the other stuff they had done that had direction to it. So I think it's very integral right there that they were emphasizing this lack of resolution, this lack of being where you're supposed to be, where you want to end up, while they're repeating this idea of strangers. And it also just stands out. Like I said, the rest of the song had beautiful resolutions to all of their progressions. And yeah, to me, it was very prominent, very in your face. Look, we're not resolving this one. We're specifically, sitting in the instability because we're dealing with strangers. So I really like how that worked out. Let's see what. Dang, there's just so much good stuff. I could listen to this all day. It is a complex, deep song though. So I'm going to try to hit as much as I can. I'm only going to scratch the surface with this analysis, but yeah, let's dive in. We're going to see how much I can remember. um, Starts off, we get this beautiful choir movement. Um, we have some higher ranged singers harmonizing. We get some a little bit lower harmonizing as well. Then we get some male vocals harmonizing in and sort of doing their own thing at times. And then we get the lead all the way at the top using this very wide, operatic almost singing style. And they're interweaving parts. They split off at some points and then come back in and line back up to provide these really strong, stable chords before branching back out and providing some instability to return back to some strength. And it's just gorgeous writing. Whoever composed this has done some classical study. I would almost guarantee it. If not, they've learned on their own through trial and error, or just asking anybody who would teach them, even if it's not professional education kind of setting. They've sought out the knowledge. I would wager. Um, if they're just doing this, just I don't know, just landing on these chords, it's just sheer luck. I can't believe that this is not somebody who is well educated in classical composition. So we have this grand opening leads into some orchestral rock elements. We get these really nice driving drums and guitars coming in, and then we see the second time that I've just kind of really blown away is this idea of uh, it's like a microcosm of trading solos. Each instrument gets a bar, and each bar solo is interrupted by a bar of choir playing. And in a sense, it's not so much as getting a solo because they all kind of do the same thing. It's these really fast 16th note runs. I think they were all going down in direction as well. And it's sort of like passing this idea around. A little bit like a long separated out Hocket, if you will. Um, it seems like they all play the same exact phrase, maybe in an octave or a fifth away or whatever is more comfortable for their range on their instrument. Because your electric guitar is playing way up here, your bass guitar is not going to be able to play that same octave. So dropping it down something, maybe dropping it a whole octave, an octave and a half, just something where the range of all those notes are going to feel more comfortable to play, or actually be possible to play on the guitar. I mean, on the bass. Um, but they're all pretty much doing the same thing. So it's almost like passing this idea around and giving everybody a chance to play it. And that just blew me away. It's something that you hear often in classical music. It's not something we hear too often in metal, and I'm going to attribute that mostly to the lack of instrumentation, especially the lack of voices. In a standard metal band, you have one, maybe two guitars and a bass and a vocalist, so you really only have three voices to pass around a melodic idea. You're not really going to get very far in it. um, at most, you can have two different tones in your guitarists, and you can have four instruments, which means that you could ideally do something like this, but your two guitars are going to sound similar. Your vocalist is going to have to scat or put lyrics to it, which is going to change it on a semi-fundamental level, at least the way that it's heard. So I think it's just a thing about metal tending to have less voices, less distinct voices. Um, so we don't actually hear it too often in metal, but it's something that pops up a lot in classical, especially ideas tend to get passed around similar families. So your flute might pass something to a clarinet, who passes it to the oboe, who passes it to the bassoon. Trumpets might hear something echoed in the trombones, and then maybe a French horn, and you get these semi-different tones to them, different timbres, but all within the same family of instrument. So, but like I said, it might just be something that classical can do because they have a wider breadth of timbres and voices to work with. But it is something that pops up a lot. in classical, and I love that it came in here because right from the start, this is hit me. It's like, hey, this is some good. This is gonna be some classical music, and I was like, okay. And then the metal comes in. I'm like, okay, this is going to be metal written like classical music, and to see these elements come in from classical music, it's just a joy. I really love it. Um, let's see. After that, it's kind of getting fuzzy. It all kind of blends together into this just joyous trip. I'm trying to think of anything that really stood out to me, other than sort of the textural things, the chordal qualities. A lot of the chords that don't typically get used in metal that are more popular in classical music because they are, well, first of all, there's a reason that metal tends to use the same chords, and it's because of the heavy distortion. You really can't add much color to a chord because once you introduce a little dissonance, your distortion is going to amplify that, and it just makes it sound gritty and, mm, to my ears, typically bad. It really amplifies that distortion. Instead of getting a little color to your chord, you're basically getting an amplified dose of the two notes rubbing together improperly. They're rubbing wrong. So the chords that that distorted and overdriven guitars tend to play are extremely stable chords, which kind of reduces how many chords you can use. It's why the bands that tend to use more colorful chords tend to have less overdrive and less distortion on their guitars, less of a chance to amplify the negative aspect. Well, not the negative aspects, the more gritty aspects of the chord. Whereas with acoustic instruments, you can kind of blend them in a little better. You don't have the amplifying, as per its name, some of these qualities that you don't want at the forefront. You kind of want them coloring in the chord quality a little bit. Um, so yeah, that's just a little audio thing right there of why we tend to see less complex chords in metal. Um, but yeah, so we've introduced some really nice, tasteful chords. So good throughout this song. We saw a ton of concepts of counterpoint, of just multiple melody lines, tons of really good layering. Um, and we've actually saw a lot of something in, again, I don't know why I keep comparing classical and metal. I think it's just pertinent right here because this kind of blends the metal sound with a lot of the composition techniques of classical, where typically we see the reverse. We hear the classical sound in metal without any. You're going to be waiting, you're going to be counting 20, 25 bars or whatever. It's a bit boring, but I understand it adds dynamics and contrast. Dynamics. Ooh, got to remember that. It adds dynamics and contrasting sections and contrasting voices, and it can change parts up depending on which instruments are playing and what kind of characteristics they bring to the sound. It's necessary for writing strong pieces. And again, metal doesn't really have that affordance because you have one higher instrument, which is your guitar, one lower instrument, which is your bass. If either one of them stops playing, you've killed half of your sound sphere. Your vocalist can kind of fill in if they're doing growls or if they're doing, higher pitched singing or whatever, but it's usually not in the exact same range as the highest of the guitars and the lowest of your basses. They're not going to perfectly fill it in. Plus, they're supposed to be the melody, and the filling in is supposed to help bolster them up and fill in the space behind them. So it's not exactly perfect for them to do that either. So again, it's just because of the smaller group. I think that's where this kind of comes in and helps a lot. because they have their full choir, they have a violin, they have a mellotron to my ears. I really don't want to call that out specifically, but I think I'm getting pretty good at determining the sound of the mellotron versus the sound of an organ. They also have some synth work going on in a couple of sections. They have their guitar, they have their bass. They have two guitars, I think. But they have a wide range of instruments, which is where they can pull some of this off. But again, though, we hear some sections where the violin only comes in at some parts. The orchestra only comes in, or not the orchestra, the choir only comes in at some parts. Your guitar and bass and drums, they are not present all the time. And it's really nice to allow the song to dictate what is necessary for the section and for the other instruments to be able to be left out without losing aspects of the track. I really love that. And part of that is just doubling up on roles so that you can have a voice leave. The bass is not the only low end here. We have the lower choir parts. We have the violin, the guitar, and the higher choir parts all taking up the high end, and any instrument can take the lead because we don't have a vocalist. We don't have an instrument that is, supposed to, in modern mainstream music, supposed to be the lead. So they're really giving themselves a lot of affordance by choosing their instruments in the band. I don't know if all these instruments are always present. Maybe this was a one-off for the album. Maybe it's a one-off for the song. I don't know. But I think it was really smart to have all these voices so that they can pull some out at times and change the feel of things. Speaking of contrast, let's talk about that. I've mentioned a few times in the last month at least that a lot of bands, the way that they're mixed and engineered is that they will have a difference between, they'll have a quiet section and a loud section, but if you actually watch your audio levels, there's no difference, right? When I'm recording these, I keep my audio from the song at minus 10 decibels, and I speak at about minus 10 to minus 5 so that I can be heard over the music. Most songs sit at negative 10 the entire time. Whether it's quiet, whether it's loud, whether it's a full sound or just two instruments, they're all at minus 10. And it's just a part of modern music engineering theory. Whatever reason they have, they must have done some sort of stuff to realize that this is what they wanted. But I am a fan that if you're going to go for a quiet section, make it quiet. And these guys did that. They cut their quiet section in the middle of the song, came down to minus 20 dBs. They cut their sound in half. And I think it does a lot of work at really providing this silence, this quiet, this contrast. I think you can hear, once you kind of notice that a lot of bands or a lot of engineers do it, you start to hear that these quiet sections aren't actually quiet. You don't actually have to turn your volume up to hear them. And you start to feel the effects of this emulation of quiet, where the quiet parts don't really sound quiet anymore. They just sound emptier. It's not that they're quieter. There's just not as many instruments playing, and the instruments that are got to boost up. And once you start to hear that, I think you kind of see through the facade of it, and it loses its impact. You don't hear the dynamics anymore, which is, I mean, it kind of sucks. To kind of lose the magic, I guess you could say. But I don't know. To me, I think it's important to be able to see through that veil. That way you can recognize when it's done well and appreciate the extra work that went into crafting that sort of experience of actually having a quiet section. And these guys, like I said, they just knocked it out of the park. Their contrast, whether they're contrasting volume or dynamics, swells, harmonic density, layering, voices, what kind of timbres we can hear, what sections are controlled by what timbres, speeds of the music, feelings of the music. I mentioned a couple of sections just felt extremely majestic, and then others, they went into this harsh, heavy metal, almost like impending doom or impending danger. Just such contrast to some of the more majestic elements throughout the song. And I think that's my big takeaway, is that this band is just extremely dynamic and has a ton of contrast on top of phenomenal composition skills. So yeah, I'm actually glad I got all that out. I think that was everything I wanted to talk about. Everything that really caught me. I almost missed the contrast. I said the word contrast and reminded myself, which is good. But yeah, I need more of this Scardust, especially if it's like this. I'm really hoping it's not a one-off, and they went for a big orchestral rhapsody-esque song for one track, and then everything else is just like a straight metal thing. I think that would just, oh man, that would be a bit of a disappointment to me, just because of how strong the compositional chops are here. And I can't discredit the musicianship either. The chops that these guys have, the choir, spot on, fire, all of it. The bassist, yeah, we kind of expect guitarists to be virtuosos. You don't have to be one, but if you are one, you're like, yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm flabbergasted that you could do that, but it's also like a very guitar thing to do. But bassists, we just don't put a lot of expectations on them. I got to point out when a bassist is killing it, and this guy or girl, I don't know who's playing the bass, just straight nasty. First of all, phenomenal tone. Second of all, those chops, man. That 16th note run at the beginning sold me. And the rest of the bass work throughout the song did not disappoint. Just phenomenal work. Drummer kills it. Tons of phenomenal runs. Has some moments of playing metronome and then some moments of shining and playing it like another instrument in a band. Love it. Love every bit of this. I need more Scardust. That's where you guys come in. Those are my thoughts on Scardust's Overture for the Estranged. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed it or not. Anything that might have bounced off of you or stood out to you. Maybe I didn't touch on. If you're a Scardust fan, point me in the direction of more awesomeness. 100%. I need more. When you're done commenting, you can head up to the description box. There's a link in there for Linktree. If you'd like to check out the Patreon, the Twitter, Discord, special selection submissions, all of it, let me know. No, don't let me. Those links are in the link tree. It's all in one nice little menu, so super convenient. You can also like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC with our penultimate short rhapsody. Looking forward to it. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.